everybody, Chris Pearson. Welcome back to the neighborhood and welcome back to another episode of NebuloCity, our first here in 2022. Very excited to be back out. We can see here, the weather sort of forecast called for a warmer than usual winter. Things don't always turn out as predicted, so you just got to be ready for anything. And got the shovel here, and I cleared a nice space in the background for the astronomy rig, that portable rig that I use. And it's gonna be a fun session. But because it's cold and the temperatures are gonna drop down to about somewhere in the high teens to low 20s in Fahrenheit, we're gonna try to shoot something that's relatively easy and very, very famous, the Great Orion Nebula. Now, this is a very popular target for October, sort of through January, February, but December, January, you get a lot of wonderful opportunities to shoot it because it's so high in the night sky. Okay, let's talk light. Every photo has what's known as dynamic range. As you can see in this video, there's the light coming in from the window, the dark over here in the shade. The camera sensors on all of these cameras, and dedicated astronomy cameras are no different, struggle to sort of capture this range of light. And with the Orion Nebula, even more so. It's just so bright. It's 1,300 light years away, hydrogen gas burning very hot. And so because of that, it's very easy to overexpose or to sort of blow out the image, particularly its core. So to tackle that, we're gonna shoot 3 different exposure lengths to try to capture as much of this beautiful object as possible. The first exposure length is really, really short, only 5 seconds, with a broadband filter to capture the red, green, and blue light coming out of that object, but most importantly, to try to capture the cluster of stars at the middle of the Orion Nebula, known as the Trapezium. Beyond that, I'm going to be shooting 165-second exposures. That's 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Again, I've done sort of testing in my area, and with my light pollution and my broadband filters, that seems to be a good amount to create what I call generally a base layer, where I can see most of the nebula, understanding I'm blowing out that core, but I can fix that later with the 5-second exposures. Now, last but not least, because there's a lot of hydrogen there, to create a luminance layer, I'm going to be shooting with my Optolong L-Extreme narrowband filter, capturing that HA data at 656 nanometers, bringing that into Photoshop to really boost the luminosity at the end. So that's ultimately what I'm trying to do, is create a composite image known as a high dynamic range image, something that the human eye can detect and will be really pleasing to see, both from the core to the outer layers of the object, and of course all of that hydrogen gas. So hopefully I'm successful. The last couple of days the weather's turned around quite well. Some of the snow has melted, so I've been able to get out there, and I hope the next day or two I'll be able to get the rest of the data and finish this project. So anyway, check in with you in a couple of days. Until then, stay tuned. Wow, it is very cold out. It's about 15 degrees, 14 degrees, but in actuality, the wind chill factor is probably down in the single digits. So I'm going to keep this brief. It's near 1 o'clock in the morning. We've had a really good night of additional HA data collection. Really excited. I think this is going to be the end of the shoot. But overall, you know, the whole setup has been working really well. I'm going to get it in, get back in, get those calibration frames taken. And, you know, the HA data is hopefully going to make a difference at the end of the day, you know, with the RGB data sort of as the foundational element. So really important, as I talked about from the beginning, you know, when you're out here in the cold elements, wintertime, get yourself a portable setup, make sure you've got a plan, get in and get out. Really critical. But other than that, I think it's been a wonderful, you know, couple of days photographing this object, and let's see at the end of the video just how well it turned out. Hey guys, welcome back. It has been a brutal winter. I was out there for days on end trying to capture that RGB and hydrogen alpha data. I was successful in doing so, got a little sick, so this video has been a little bit delayed, but I'm glad that we finally got it done. And I want to quickly walk through my workflow in terms of what I've done with the red, green, and blue data from my broadband filter, as well as that shot of the trapezium, and last but not least, the hydrogen alpha data that I have to try to kick up some of that luminosity. So let's go ahead into Photoshop and see what we need to do here. Okay, so we are in Photoshop, and here you can see a very simple palette of 3 layers, including a base layer, that's my broadband filter data, as well as a trapezium layer, that's the 5-second data, and last but not least, the hydrogen alpha layer, that's data from my Optolong L Extreme narrowband filter. So I stacked all of that data in AstroPixel Processor, APP. If you want to learn more about my pre-processing workflow, I'd recommend you click on the link above to a video I produced on that a few months ago. Similarly, these images have been stretched and adjusted and color balanced in Photoshop as a post-process editing workflow. So again, I created another video for that. The link is above if you want to learn a little bit more about how I go, you know, about stretching this data once I have the stacked images in place. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to try to keep it brief and focus on how we bring these 3 layers together. So as you can see in this image, the core is completely blown out, and that is very normal. It's to be expected with a broadband filter, especially from city skies. So what we have here next is the trapezium layer. If I turn that on, big difference, right? These are the 5-second shots that were stacked, and if you look at the core, there's the trapezium. It's really, really awesome to see that separated out from, you know, from the general broadband data. So what needs to happen here is one of 2 things. You can either create a mask layer above this trapezium layer by clicking on base layer, hitting Control-C, clicking on the trapezium layer. You can create this sort of mask, if you will, above to create a mask layer. I tend to follow a less traditional route. I don't know if it's necessarily better, but I just wanted to showcase it to you guys as just another way of sort of doing the post-process editing. So I'm going to click on trapezium, and you can see here we've got opacity at 100%. So sort of like a mask, but almost in reverse. What I do is I just reduce the opacity down to a level that I feel, you know, is really good, and where I can start to see that data. If I were to go down further, of course, if I were to reduce the opacity, I would again just see the layer underneath, and if I were to go all the way up, it would be too dark. So I try to find a level sort of in between, whether it's, you know, 25, 35, 40%. And what we're going to do here now is, now that I can see this, I'm going to sort of zoom out all the way, and then I'm going to pick up on an eraser here, and I've got it set at about 1400. You could probably bring that down to about 1000. And you want to make sure you've got a good soft brush here. There are a number of different brushes, but you're going to want to make sure that you've got a soft round brush. But if you look here, as I hover over the trapezium data and just left click and drag that, you know, that deletion of data, and as I do that, what you'll start to see is, little by little, the layer beneath, which has more of that bright data, the nebulosity will pop out. And as I get closer and closer to the core, you'll see the data even within start to light up. So again, this is very It's a separate technique, but it's similar to layering and masking. Now you got to be careful. You don't want to get too close to the core because that's going to require a little bit more of a feather touch. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go up here and we're going to reduce the feather down to about 110, 120, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then we're going to zoom in. And now we're really going to start making sure that we've got all of that faint detail in the outer edges of the nebula as much as possible. Again, just staying clear of the core. We'll work our way in little by little. And you know, this could take quite some time to get it exactly the way you want it. As you can see here, one of the things that we're starting to see right away is that this core is getting really dark. So there's a couple of things you can do. You know, number one, you could hit Control Z and go back if you feel like you've sort of overcooked, you know, the deletion of the data that was there. You can also adjust the opacity because at the end of the day, that is also going to be a determinant in how bright or how dark that core is. So if you feel like it's just too dark, you can reduce the opacity to bring up the lights there a little bit in the data. And so if I bring it down to about 26%, you know, I can start to see a little bit more of a blending, if you will, between the two sides. Now, you don't want to go too far because if you do that, you're going to start to lose that. You're going to start to lose the trapezium. Okay, so now that we have that taken care of, the next thing that we need to do is, you know, build in the hydrogen alpha data. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that channel on, and as you can see there, obviously a lot of hydrogen data. So similarly, what we're going to do here is, well, first things first, we're going to go from normal, the mode here, normal, down to luminosity. The other thing you're going to want to do again is just adjust the opacity. So I tend to reduce the opacity down quite a bit just to give a little bit of a pop. I don't like the luminosity layer to be sort of overbearing. So here I'm going to set it somewhere between 18 to 20%. And you know, it gives a little bit of a boost, you can see there, in terms of just giving a little bit more data, a little more detail on the edges. And again, you can play around with the opacity slider, you know, with that hydrogen alpha data. It's totally up to you. And so we've started out again with a base layer. We now have the trapezium, and then adding in your hydrogen alpha data. And sort of the combination between the three and playing around with those layers, you're going to find the balance that works best for you. So guys, that's pretty much going to wrap things up here for this episode of NebuloCity. I really appreciate you sticking around. Did you learn something? Did you like what you saw? What did you think of the high dynamic range element? Was it worth the time? It just really was a very labor-intensive exercise, stacking all that data, bringing into Photoshop. But you know, I think at the end of the day, it really does, you know, do justice for these kinds of objects where you got that really bright core and great nebulosity on the outside. You sort of do have to navigate, and I think, you know, the Photoshop tool allows you to do some of that. It's fun, especially if you're a beginner like me, only a year or so into the hobby. It's definitely a nice starting point. But hey, if you do high dynamic range photos and editing and astrophotography in a different way, go ahead and drop a comment below. Hit that like button, you know, subscribe. I love hearing from my subscribers and others about how you guys go about doing this stuff. So at the end of the day, you know, it's all about passion. It's all about doing what you absolutely love to do. That's so critical in this hobby. And, you know, we got a lot of time left in 2022. Galaxy season is right around the corner. There's just so much going on. So we're going to go ahead and leave it there. Best of luck on all of your projects as always. I love seeing your photos and videos, you know, on Instagram, YouTube, AstroBin. Just keep them coming. So happy to be part of this community. And until we see you guys again here in the neighborhood, as always, take care.